Hello, everyone, and welcome to the round 4 recap of RA March Open. As you saw in the previous recaps, probably, I started the tournament with 2 wins against 2 low-rated players, and then in round 3, I lost against Canada's #1 active player, Grandmaster Sean-Rodrigue Lemieux. So I was at 2 out of 3, and I was facing a candidate master, Ryan Lane from Australia. So he's kind of a different type of challenge for me because he's a low-rated player. I mean, kind of a must-win situation, especially after losing round 3. But he's also a type of player who can actually swing and beat high-rated players. So he's a pretty new player to the Canadian chess scene. He was living in Australia, and then he came to the Carleton University, studying here, close to Ottawa. Um, so I was kind of worried because I checked his previous tournaments in Australia and I saw he has wins against FIDE Masters, international masters in classical tournaments. So I knew that he's going to come here and he's going to be able to beat me if I'm not in my best form. So the other thing I saw is that he plays very solidly. He plays e4, e5, and even against d4, I think he was playing King's Indian, but in a very like solid and like non-committal way. So after a long think about what should I play, I decided to go with e4. So usually I'm not a big fan of playing e4 against e4, e5 players, but this time I actually had a decent prep. So he played e5, I played knight f3, knight c6, and now I played d4 playing the Scotch opening. So one of the reasons I like Scotch as opposed to Ruy Lopez and Italian is that Ruy Lopez and Italian, they're like definitely the best openings to fight for advantage for white. But you gotta know a lot of different setups that black can go for. Like let's say against Ruy Lopez, they can play Berlin. They can play the classical Ruy Lopez. They can play the Fianchetto. They can play the Cosio. And they can do all of these with like a delayed version after a6 bishop a4. And even later on, they can play Arkingels. They can play Breyer. They can play Zaitsev. Like there are so many different lines in the Ruy Lopez that people can play. And someone who plays this all their life, they're gonna understand the positions better, even if I have some good preparation and memorize some opening lines. So the Scotch though is a little bit more concrete. It's like easier to prepare and presents a set of unique positions. So here the two main moves are knight f6 and bishop c5, and my opponent played bishop c5. So there's this line, if I take the knight on c6, black can actually play queen to f6, threatening mate on f2, and then taking back on c6 in a better version. So I decided for this game to play knight to b3, attacking the bishop on c5. Ryan plays bishop e6, and now I play knight to c3. So black plays knight to f6, very normal move. And here, there are two ways to play. One is to play bishop g5, and one is to play queen e2. I played queen to e2, delaying bishop to g5, because I want to see what plan black is going to go for. So sometimes when black haven't castled yet, black can decide to go with d6, bishop e6, queen e7, and then long castle. So I don't know yet where black is going to castle. And if black castles queenside, I was analyzing this line, and the best setup for white is actually to go bishop e3, g3, and bishop g2. And if I go bishop g5 right away, the bishop on g5 is actually not going to be that powerful, because if black ends up castling queenside, then they can hit my bishop with h6, g5. So I decided to play queen e2, and only after short castles, now I play bishop to g5. Because now if black plays like this, then of course they're going to weaken their king. And the pin now is a little bit annoying. So one of the ideas for black to liberate the position is to play knight to d4 and try to trade off some pieces. So my opponent played knight d4 here. And in this position, I played the best move, queen to d2, defending my bishop on g5. Just to show you, if I play queen to d3, that's going to be a huge blunder, because black is going to trade and now take on f2, sacrificing a bishop, because now if I take after knight g4 check, my bishop on g5 is going to hang. But there's a funny thing is that there's a different move order. If black plays h6 and then knight d4, now queen d3 is the best move, because of course with a bishop here, there's no bishop takes f2 anymore. And if I go queen to d2, now it's going to be a blunder because of knight takes e4, attacking the bishop and the queen on d2, and black is going to be up material this time. So white needs to be careful with all these nuances here. I, of course, check before the game. I go queen to d2, knight takes b3, a takes b3, and now rook e8. So my opponent is putting pressure down the e-file and trying to attack my pawn on e4. So I long castle, getting out of the way. Of course, black can't take just yet because of the pin. Now he goes h6. So I was looking at this game, at this line before the game, and I saw that the best move for white is to play h4, sacrificing the bishop on g5. So if I go bishop h4, black actually has knight takes e4 again, and I'm going to be in a worse position. And if I take on f6, then black is going to get the bishop pair, and I'm not going to have any sort of pressure to compensate for that. So the only way to fight for advantage in this position is to play h4, sacrificing the bishop on g5. So the funny story is that before the round, I was preparing in the car with my friend Zachary Dukic, and I was so worried of these lines because, of course, there are a lot of details. What if they take the bishop? How can I show the compensation? And this is something I'm kind of scared of in my games. Like, I'm kind of scared to be down material without a clear, instant payback, basically, like an instant compensation. And there were so many lines that I was analyzing. What if they take the bishop? What if they go d6 and then take the bishop? What if they go c6 and then take the bishop? And of course, it's rigorous to like memorize everything. And I remember my friend Zach told me that you just let the initiative flow. Don't be worried of h takes g5. Your opponent is going to be much more scared opening up the h file towards the king. So I kind of took his advice, but I still like looked at some lines to understand what happens if he takes. For instance, if he takes the bishop, I take back with a pawn, opening up the h file. Now after knight takes c4, knight takes c4, rook takes c4, bishop d3, I'm down a whole piece and a pawn. No, just a whole piece, yeah. But now there's no instant mate. Let's say my opponent plays rook to e5. I have this very nice idea, giving the check to h7. And after king f8, now I play bishop to f5, stopping queen g5 ideas by cutting the connection of the rooks. And now I'm also threatening rook h8 check to win the queen. So my opponent has to play like this. Now I play rook h1, and the attack is just overwhelming with the e-file opening up. And if my opponent plays rook to e8, now I play rook to h7, trying to double the rooks on the h-file. If he goes d6, rook dh1, king f8, now I simply play f4, and there's so many plans here for white. It looks like I don't have an instant compensation, but queen c3 is coming first of all, threatening g7, and there's no rook e5 with a pawn here now. And I also have this idea of just going f5, f6, and suffocating the king. So even though I'm down a piece, black just doesn't have any good moves. And in the best lines, they have to actually sack the bishop on f5, and of course I'm going to be better after that. So one other thing that happened in the game is that up until this point, when my opponent was playing, he was playing these moves very slowly, like knight d4 very slowly, and then he spent a good like 2 minutes on rook e8, another 2 minutes on h6. So I was actually pretty happy. I was still in prep. When I played h4, I was like, okay, this guy is going to tank for at least 30 minutes now, because he's not familiar with the opening, and he's going to sit there and just calculate what happens if he takes the bishop in different instances. But the good thing for me is that I know it's bad. So he's the one who needs to figure it out over the board. But right here, something weird happened. My opponent blitzed c6, which is the best move. I analyzed before the game, and I knew c6 is the best move. Preparing d5, breaking the center. So I knew king b1 is the best move, just getting the king into a safer square. And now my opponent blitzed d5, which is still a best move. And I was shell-shocked. I was like, this guy didn't know theory. What happened? Why is he blitzing all the moves without even looking at hg5 lines? Which I thought he's going to really struggle to figure out over the board. Because let's say hg5, hg5, knight g4 this time, threatening some knight takes f2 ideas. Now I go bishop to c4. Now there are 2 lines to consider. What if black takes on f2? Now I play queen to f4, threatening mate on f7, and also some queen h4. And if d5 takes, knight takes d1. Now I play queen to h2, threatening mate on h8. And if he goes king f8, now the last accurate move, pawn to d6. Now there's no way for king to escape the mating net. So I was looking at these lines before the game, and I was like, it's gonna be so difficult for him to figure out all of these. And even like d5 here is another interesting line after taking the bishop. So after takes g6, trying to like consolidate the king, I will go queen to f4, and after bishop f5, I just take, attacking the queen and the pawn on b7, and play can continue something like this. Queen c7, takes, c takes b7, and the thing is after rook a8, I can take another pawn, bishop f7, and rook h7 check, and taking the bishop, and like, after all of that, I'm going to be up like 5 pawns against the piece with a winning position. So I was like, he's going to spend so long calculating all of that and probably going to get scared at the end of the day. So this is something I usually hope for. When I play a line like this, I hope for my opponent to just sit there and try to figure it out, what happens if I take the bishop, because it's normal. And then at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to calculate everything, but they're going to be scared. They're just going to play a normal move, but they're going to be down like 40 minutes on the clock. Well, my opponent blitzed the best move, d5. And I was shocked. So I knew that a best is now to take on f6, and after queen takes f6, now I take on d5, and now he plays queen takes f2. So I remember I had this position in my file, but I didn't really go deeper than this. I was like, there's no way my opponent knows all of that, but he actually knew all of that. And he kind of like played some mind games by playing slowly, baiting me to go into this line, thinking that he doesn't know theory, but he actually started blitzing everything. And now I was kind of mentally in a bad situation. I was like, why didn't I consider this line more deeply? Because I had no idea what to play now. Looks like black has the bishop pair, and I was questioning myself, how can I compensate for that? And the first move that I was out of prep was here, and I made a slight inaccuracy. I played the second best move, but it's a slight inaccuracy with bishop c4. I thought it's better to keep things flexible with bishop c4 while my queen is on d2. And if he takes, I'm going to take with a rook and get a better version with rooks probably getting doubled up here. But the bishop doesn't belong in c4 in this line. The best move that I should have played was to trade the queens, trade the pawns, and now not bishop to c4, which looks pretty active, but bishop to e2 is the way to fight for advantage, because the bishop is going to come to f3 and exert pressure on the c6 pawn, like this. But I did not know that. I played bishop c4. Now after queen takes d2, rook takes d2, bishop to g4, black is actually the one in the driving seat. Black has a better position because they have the bishop pair in the open position, but just a little bit better. So I took on c6, bc6, and now I played rook to f1, threatening the pawn on f7. So my opponent decided to play bishop e6, which kind of made me happy. If I was black, I would have probably played with rook e7, defending the pawn on f7, and after rook d6, just go rook c8 and try to hold all of these pawns. And the thing I like about this position for black is that usually when you have the bishop pair against the bishop and knight, it's better not to trade a pair of bishops. Because one bishop always have this weakness that it can only control half of the squares on the board. But if you have the bishop pair, both bishops combined can actually dominate the entire board, especially in an open board like this. He played bishop e6, which engine approves, but I personally think it's going to make things a little bit more difficult for black. For instance, the game went rook d6, bishop takes d4, b takes d4, rook a c8, and now I played rook to d7, attacking the pawn on f7. So here comes the blunder from my opponent. Now you see that there's a pressure on f7, and if he goes rook f8, it's just way too passive. The rook is not belonging to f8, just defend, defend, defend forever. The best move is to play f6, of course, just saving the pawn, but my opponent was probably worried that it's just going to weaken all these light squares. So now you see the problem of trading the light squared bishop. If you trade off a light squared bishop, if I can get a knight on f5 or a knight on g6, all of a sudden he's in deep trouble. Because now this bishop on b6 can't really do anything about this knight. But the point is, it's so difficult for me to actually get a knight there. And that's something my opponent should have realized in the game. Like, it looks like he's weakening all these light squares, but it's kind of impossible for me to get a knight to f5 or g6. If I play rook f3, trying to like go with this threat on the 7th rank, he can just simply play rook c7 and getting rid of my rook on the 7th rank. So black is actually slightly better here because pawns are on both sides and he has bishop, which is better in these situations usually. But my opponent played rook c7, which kind of blunders a pawn on f7. Rook f takes f7. So I think he thought that after takes, and rook d8, he's going to have excellent drawing chances in this endgame. Okay, he gives up a pawn, but he thought that he probably can hold this endgame. I will show you why. So first of all, I kind of have to take the rook. I spent a long time here trying to make a move like rook d3 work, trying to preserve the rooks on the board. I thought this would give me better winning chances, but then I saw rook d4, attacking the pawn on c4 and the pawn on h4. Now I have to trade the rooks not to lose the pawn, and he's going to get like a favorable version of what we're going to discuss soon. So I took on d8, and after bishop takes d8, I was kind of facing a dilemma. If I go h5, the thing is this king is going to come in and harass my pawns. That's the problem with the knight in these sorts of endgames. The pawns are on both sides, and it's very difficult for knight to defend both sides. So if I go h5, the king is going to come in and try to win the pawn on h5. And if I go g3, which is a bad move, he's going to bring the king. And I was hoping I can establish something with a knight on e2 and a king on f2 to defend all of my pawns, and then slowly put my pawn on b3 and try to build up from that. But the problem is, after all of that, he has this very nice move, bishop to f6, stopping my knight from coming to e2. And if I go b3 first, then I'm just too slow. King g4, knight e2, bishop c7. And I'm not in time. I'm just one tempo short to get my king to f2 and hold the position. So when I was thinking here, I had a very long think, and I saw that after takes, I can actually go h5. And the idea is, after king f7, I don't care about my pawn on h5. I go for the queenside break with b4 right away. My idea next is to go c5, fix the pawn on c6, and maybe try to win it, and also some b5 ideas. I'm trying to maybe just promote the c pawn if the king is so far away. So again, you see the problem of the bishop in these sorts of endgames. If I go c5 and fix the pawn on c6, there's no way this bishop can defend the pawn anymore. So here my opponent made a mistake. He played king f6, which is a very normal move, but he should have gone g6, which is kind of counterintuitive because it looks like h5 is my weakness and he should go after it, but he just doesn't have time for that. If he plays like this, then he can get some more activity with the king. And we're going to get a position like this where the king is way too active defending. And if c6, just bishop b6. And if c7, now king d7, and black is going to hold the game. Black might even have winning chances with the distant pass pawn. And if I take here, here, my knight is so misplaced on a7. Still, I can be able to maybe press that, but it's very difficult to win this game. Anyways, my opponent played a more natural move, king to f6, and now I played c5, which is a slight inaccuracy. That was my idea, though. I wanted to fix this pawn on c6 and have both ideas, knight e2, knight e4, and also b5. So the best move was to go knight to e2, and the idea is that the pawn is kind of already fixed on c6. And now if he wastes the tempo on bishop e7 to attack my pawn, now I can go c5. And the thing is, if he stops knight d4 with king to e5, I can always play pawn to c3 and prepare knight d4 again. And he can't really defend like this because now these pawns are going to be vulnerable. And if the game goes something like this, and he holds all the pawns, I'm just consolidating easily, and I'm going to be up a pawn in the endgame. And I'm going to slowly build up on that. Just king d3, king e4, and black doesn't have any active counterplay here. So this is completely winning. So the best is to go c5. The best is not to go c5 because now black plays this move king to e5. And now the king is very active on e5. I thought he's going to go king g5, but that's just losing because my knight is going to come in. But he played a really good move, king e5. Now I tried to activate my king with king a2, and now he finds the best move, pawn to a5, which I saw in the game. And the idea is that now his king is very close. If I go b5, he's going to take and play king to d5. I was thinking about some ideas where I go knight d6. He can't take the pawn because of knight b7 check. But then I saw he simply goes bishop c7, knight f5, bishop e5, and he's going to win the pawn soon. So I don't have anything. So against a5, the best I had was king to b3, a b4, and king d4. And I saw this position from distance when going for this king a2 plan. And I thought, I wasn't sure I'm winning this, but I was like, it's gonna be unpleasant for him for sure. He's down a pawn still, and the pawn is fixed on c6. So it's very difficult still to hold this position. And I knew for a fact that the best move is to play king d4. And what I saw against that was to go knight a4, and after bishop e7, trying to tie my pieces down to defending the c5 pawn, I always have this nice check with c3. Now if the king goes here, I can always like activate my king and go after the pawn. If he goes king d5, now I have this nice check on b6, and now my king gets closer, not letting his king to tie my pieces down to defensive c5. But this is still holding with correct play, but it's still incredibly unpleasant to play for black for a long time. My opponent went for a wrong plan. Instead of king d4, he decided to go after the pawn on h5. But again, that's just way too slow. So after king f4, first of all, I played king c4, making sure that the king is not coming back to d4. And now he should have admitted his mistake and gone back with king e5 and defend like this. Knight e2, king e6, knight e4, and king d7. Just try to hold this pawn with all the power in the world and hold this pawn with a bishop. And this is a very, very tough way to defend. Like I have ideas, I can try to bring the king, I can slowly gain space. Maybe when the king comes here to defend against my king, then switch back and try to attack this pawn. Like, Engine might hold this, but I think in a practical game, it's just a nightmare to play this as black. My opponent went with king g5, but now I play knight a2. Now the knight is coming to b4 and rounding up the c6 pawn. And now the c pawn is going to be very strong. So he took knight b4, and I think he played a move which made it very easy for me. He played king g6, trying to come back and defend against the c pawn. One tricky line would have been to play king g4 and trying to go with an active counterplay with the g and h pawns. The thing is, after I take bishop c7, knight d4, he's going to go after the g pawn and start trading counterplay. And I was looking at this position, which could have happened in the game. And if I go c7, it's actually a draw after h5. And my knight is not fast enough to control both pawns. What I should do here is to take on g7, stop the pawn from being pushed to h5, and now the thing is, I just slowly play. If the king goes to g4, then I'm fast enough to get the bishop, and the c pawn is going to decide the game. And if the king comes closer like this, the thing is, black doesn't have any moves. I will just wait around for a long time, get my pawns into the best squares, and when the time is right, I just go knight to e8, stopping h5 with knight f6 check. And if he wastes one more move, I'm just going to go c7, and my c pawn is going to be faster than the h pawn. So like a little bit of a trick here involved. I was happy to see king g6 in the game because now I take on c6, bishop c7, and now knight d4. And the thing is, now black doesn't have any active counterplay, and I just round up the game. King f6, and I play king d5. Very nice move, stopping the king from coming in and centralizing my king. After g5, now I attack the bishop on c7. Bishop goes to f4, and now I found the win. I was sure that now I'm winning. I found this very nice move. So c6 is also winning, but I saw this is much more simpler. I go knight d6. Now my threat is to simply go c6, c7, and promote the pawn. The only way they can stop it is to go king e7, but that loses the pawn on h6, and I'm going to be effectively up 2 pawns. So he played bishop to e3, c6, and bishop b6, but I still play c7, sacrificing the pawn because now I have this nice fork, knight to e8, winning the bishop on c7. So my opponent played for a little bit more. He tried to generate some counterplay with h5, but I just win another pawn by force. Knight e6, hitting the pawn on g5, and after g4, knight g7, hitting the pawn on h5, and after h4, now I give this check on f5, winning the pawn on h4, so there's absolutely no counterplay, and I have an extra piece and an extra pawn. So in this position, my opponent resigned the game, and I got a very delightful, hard-earned win. So I know I was kind of flustered by my opponent's excellent preparation until queen takes f2. I was actually impressed how he knew all of that. And especially after I made this mistake and I got the slightly worse endgame where he had the bishop here, I was kind of doubtful that I'm going to win this game. But once he gave me this chance, once he gave me this extra pawn in the endgame, I started really thinking. I spent a long time on all these moves. Rook takes d8, h5, like all these b4, c5 ideas. And like most of the game, like I think 3 hours of this game was spent basically in the endgame. So if you're an endgame fan, you probably will enjoy Even looking at some of these moments deeper, it's a very instructive endgame, I would say. It showed the power of the knight and the weakness of the bishop, where it can't really defend one complex of squares. And at the end of the day, he lost because the bishop couldn't really hold the c6 pawn, which I fixed by b4, c5. Yeah, hard-earned win. I was pretty happy with this result, and I moved to 3 out of 4. So overall, even though I lost to Sean, with 3 wins, I kind of more than compensate for that. And the last round, I will get another high-rated player, which is going to be a very interesting game to analyze in the next recap. So make sure to know your let me know your comments about this game in the comment section down below. And let me know how did you like that preparation and also the end game grind. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Really appreciate it. And see you soon with the next recaps. Have a great one and see you soon. Goodbye.